3 hours before our family trip, my mother-in-law suddenly asked if I was really coming. She reminded me that I'm just the daughter-in-law and suggested I should stay home. I was really excited about this trip abroad and had planned everything, hoping it would help me connect with my in-laws. But instead of bringing us closer, things got worse. They didn't want me to go, and my mother-in-law seemed happy about it. Even my husband didn't say anything to support me. I felt hurt and frustrated. If they treated me this way, I decided I didn't care anymore. They would regret leaving me behind, right? But I ended up doing something unexpected as I watched them leave. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mess, 28 years old, and I'm studying design at an advertising agency. I married Rick almost a year ago. We met 3 years ago while working on an ad project. At first, we talked about work, but soon we found out that we both love to travel. Rick likes to travel within the country, while I enjoy going abroad. We connected over our dream trips and shared photos of places we wanted to visit. Our relationship grew deeper, and after 2 years of dating, Rick proposed. Although we haven't had our honeymoon yet, Rick often says he wants our first trip abroad to be our honeymoon. One time, I asked him if he had ever been abroad. He replied, "No, I always worry about not being able to communicate well." I reassured him, saying, "Don't worry, with smartphones and basic English, we can manage." I also told him, I'm not completely fluent in English either, but I really want to travel abroad. Seeing the beautiful landscapes that I've only seen on TV or in books is incredibly exciting. He agreed, saying, "Yeah, you're right. Japan has many charming places and attractions, but I'm drawn to traveling overseas. Every time I travel abroad, I'm amazed by how big everything is. Experiencing those stunning views up close, which you can't fully understand just by staying in Japan, is the real excitement of international travel. Until now, I mostly traveled with friends or alone. Now, I can go on trips abroad with my wonderful husband, and it's joyful to share those experiences together." However, I didn't realize there was a side to my kind husband that I hadn't seen before. I noticed something about 2 months after we got married. We decided to rent an apartment halfway between our workplaces. Even though Rick's company wasn't doing well and his salary wasn't high, he still had some income. But just 2 months into our marriage, he surprised me with a request. He said, "Hey Sally, about the rent, could you cover mine for a while?" I was confused and asked why. He explained that his salary had been cut, and when he asked his parents for help, they told him to ask his wife. I was surprised and asked if his pay was really that low. He nodded quietly. He had always been cheerful, but seeing him like this made me hesitant to ask more questions. I never expected this just 2 months into our marriage, and it left me feeling disheartened. I should have checked our salaries before we got married. I didn't want him to take on extra work with his already long hours, so I said, "Okay," and decided to cover the rent completely starting that month. But that wasn't the only problem. My in-laws began visiting our new home often. Rick's family includes his father, mother, and sister, Amy. Since I agreed to cover Rick's share of the rent, my in-laws started coming over more frequently. They would show up without warning, have dinner, and sometimes stay overnight. It's not that I dislike them, but I felt uncomfortable, especially around my mother-in-law. She seemed to hold a grudge against me. Whenever she visited, she would make snide comments. For example, she'd say, "Hey Sally, just because you're busy doesn't mean you can neglect your chores." I would respond, "I'm doing the best I can with the chores." Then she'd say, "I heard from Rick that sometimes you come home later than him. As a wife, prioritizing work over household chores is unacceptable." I tried to explain, "That's only when there's a deadline. Usually, I leave on time and take care of things at home." I always found myself getting defensive. My mother-in-law would say, "I bet work is more important to you than Rick." I would reply, "That's not true." I turned to my husband, hoping for support, but he just chuckled awkwardly and said, "Don't fight, okay?" It frustrated me that my mother-in-law annoyed me, but I was also angry at Rick for not standing up for me. Even when my father-in-law and sister-in-law made snide comments, he just smiled and watched. He always went along with their remarks, which hurt me more than dealing with the comments themselves. One day, when I got home from work, I found Rick looking at a travel guidebook for Hawaii. I asked, "What's that for?" I was curious about his sudden interest in travel. He lit up with excitement and said, "Hey Sally, How about going on a trip to Hawaii together? You've been there before, right? I replied. Yeah, I've been there 3 times. He continued. My family also wants to go, so your mom is coming too. I felt nothing but anxiety about his proposal. I really wanted to go on a trip abroad just with Rick, but with my in-laws involved, there were too many complications. Plus, I couldn't imagine my mother-in-law wanting to go on a trip with me, given how she felt about me. I tried to hint at my concerns, saying, I'd like to go to Hawaii, but I'm worried that your family won't enjoy themselves if I come along. He responded, that's not true. Besides, this trip was suggested by Mom. Just then, I heard someone knocking on the door. Hello? I called out. We'll be right out. I hurried to the front door. When I opened it, there stood my mother-in-law. Hello, Sally, are you going out today? She asked. I replied, we're actually heading out on a trip right now. I'm really excited for Hawaii. It's been a while. She looked confused and said, what are you talking about? We're the ones going on the trip. I was momentarily taken aback by her statement. Just then, Rick rushed over from inside the house, apologizing for being late. Seeing him, my mother-in-law smiled broadly and said, Rick, you're so late. I've been waiting outside. He replied, sorry, Mom, my hair wasn't cooperating. She urged him, you could have fixed that later. Come on, let's go. Dad and Amy are waiting. Hurry up. Then she added, Mom, that bag looks heavy. Let me carry it for you. My husband offered, thank you. You're always so kind. Rick, my mother-in-law praised him. He blushed happily at her words, but I felt a bit uneasy for a moment. Since it was the start of the trip, I didn't want to feel irritated right away. I grabbed my carry-on and began putting on my shoes. Then my mother-in-law looked puzzled and said slowly, wait a minute, Sally, what are you doing? I replied, I'm putting on my shoes too. We're going on a trip together. She responded coldly, enjoy your trip then. I was confused and said, what do you mean? We're all going to Hawaii together, right? My mother-in-law chuckled mockingly and said, seriously, you weren't actually planning to come along, were you? I insisted. Why would I not come on a family trip? She replied, this is supposed to be a family trip. You know, you're just a daughter-in-law, so obviously, you're staying home and holding down the fort. Just as I was about to walk out the door, her unexpected remark hit me hard, sending a wave of anguish through my chest and making me feel dizzy. I asked desperately, Rick, what does she mean? But he didn't respond. Instead, he headed toward the car with my mother-in-law, leaving me feeling like I might collapse. In that moment, my feelings toward Rick and my in-laws quickly cooled. What did I expect? Maybe it was foolish to hope my mother-in-law would ever support me, but I never imagined Rick would betray me like this. It became clear he had no intention of standing by me from the start. Everything felt absurd. I decided I didn't care anymore. I did love my husband, but I realized I was in love with an idealized version of him, not the real person. A spineless puppet who couldn't stand up to his family and just followed his mother's wishes. What had I ever seen in him? If only I had noticed this sooner, things might have turned out differently, but dwelling on regrets wouldn't change anything. I resolved to take action. Their trip was planned for a week, starting today. With that in mind, I packed my belongings into cardboard boxes and called my father to bring a car for me. While I waited for my father, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law calling. I knew why she was calling but deliberately ignored it. She must have been furious since she had been calling me non-stop lately, but I stood firm in my decision. Then my husband called. He probably had a lot to say. I took a deep breath and answered, hello? Sally, you picked up, he said, sounding flustered and slightly trembling. I could imagine how panicked he must be, and I couldn't help but laugh. What's wrong? I asked. He replied, your mom kept calling me non-stop too. It's a disaster. We arrived in Hawaii fine, but I don't know where to go from here. I really want to check into the accommodation, but I don't know where it is or how to get there. What should I do? What do you mean you're asking me now? I replied, frustrated. You left without knowing anything, and now you're asking me? Isn't this your responsibility? He said, but you made the reservation, right? I thought someone in the family would have the travel plans. I chuckled bitterly, realizing how typical my spontaneous in-laws were. He raised his voice. Just tell me the travel schedule already. I could see how irresponsible my husband was. I muttered to myself in frustration. This guy is just his mother's son through and through. I firmly demanded to know the travel schedule from him. Are you kidding me? I'm feeling seriously uncomfortable because of you guys. Why do you think only you should have fun? He protested. There's no way I'm telling you. Figure it out yourselves. I retorted sharply. That's too heartless. I'll buy souvenirs. He tried to reason with me, but I replied, souvenirs? I don't need them. Don't make a fool of me. I trusted you and put up with your family, but I've had enough. How could you? I couldn't hold back my disappointment. This incident made me realize that he was just as disappointing as his mother. I felt used, only there to make travel plans, and left out of the much-anticipated trip to Hawaii. I couldn't forgive his family for this betrayal. I thought, let them struggle in that unfamiliar place on their own. Wait, hey Sally, my husband called out, but his attempts to reach me fell on deaf ears as I firmly ended the call. After waiting for my father, I headed straight to my parents' house. Meanwhile, it turned out that my husband and his family were having a rough time in Hawaii without me. Despite arriving, they panicked because they didn't know where their original booking was. They ended up staying at a random luxury resort, paying $5,000 per night for 4 people and maxing out their credit cards, which were eventually declined. They ended up spending the last 3 days camping in Hawaii. With my husband's modest salary, there was no way he could pay off the maxed-out credit cards. Ultimately, I decided to file for a divorce, citing his financial irresponsibility. While I awaited my husband's agreement, I was determined not to give up. I had already consulted a lawyer, so the divorce process was underway. This incident caused a rift in my husband's family. He blamed his mother, and she blamed him, leading to estrangement. As for me, I would stay with my parents until I found a new place. Initially worried, my parents now admired my resilience. I won't deny that I'm hurting, but dwelling on such a toxic family is pointless. This experience has taught me to better judge people in the future, and that's my focus moving forward.